Hi everybody, my name is Taina Perone and I'm a 5th year student of IMC school. In this video I'm going to talk about the Renaissance, all the society in this period, why it was developed in Italy, and all things that is related to the Renaissance. For example, the art, the artists, the patrons, the techniques, and all that. The Renaissance was a movement that started in Florence, Italy in the late Middle Ages, around 1300 and 1400. It was a period of change, creativity and progress, and it was when the people started to study the Greek and Roman works and ideas, so they compared to his civilization, because they focus in war and in the hard work, and Greek and Rome and Greece and Rome focused on human. So the Renaissance was the rebirth of Roman and Greek ideas related to the exploration, the innovation, the knowledge, and also the human. The people started to study the human anatomy and the human behavior. In the Middle Ages, questioning the role of the church was considered an heresy, but in the Renaissance, the people started to study the human, the art, the philosophy, the literature, and not only the religion. They studied the religion, but they didn't focus on it. Here was developed a new way of thinking called humanism. The people started to think that life could be enjoyable and could have some comforts. And to have a better life, the people have to study, for example, science, art, philosophy, music, literature. So all those arts have a development. Also, artists and sculptures, for example, change the subject, because in the Middle Ages they focused on religion, but in the Renaissance they focused in the human beings, in the human needs, human abilities, in the reason, the logic. Another thing to say is that the people in the Middle Ages said that, for example, if they didn't have an explanation for something, they say that was because God wanted to do it. But here in the Renaissance, with the logic and the reason, the people started to think, to investigate why the things are like that. And some important humanistic thinkers were Francesco Petrarch, also Niccolo Machiavelli, and Baldassare Castiglione. The end of the Middle Ages was marked by several historical events that transformed the European society, economy, politics, and culture. First of all was the revival of the trade and the growth of the societies. The Crusades, that were a fight between the Muslims and the Catholics to obtain the Holy Land, these Crusades were really important because they introduced Europe to Asian and Middle Eastern products, such as species, perfumes, pottery, and silk. Also, there were new improvements in navigation, such as the compass, in the sea routes, in the ships, and all that increased the commerce and the trade. This was really important because to Europe was brought back new ideas and also products that were important to develop the Renaissance. Besides, the trading centers flourished, and also a new social class that was the merchants. They make their money by selling and transporting goods, and also a lot of people moved to the cities to share their skills and their ideas. For example, the sculptors, the metal workers, the craft workers, the armor maker, the butchers, etc. Another historical event that transformed Europe was the Black Death. This was a plague that killed 1/3 of the population of Europe. This was spread by rats that contain small fleas that have the plague, and these rats came to Europe by the commerce and the trade with Asia. There, the people experience horrible things, and they started to question if the church could heal everything. Also related to the economy, the bubonic plague brought wealth to the common class because the surviving workers could demand more money due to the reduced number of laborers. Also, the merchants couldn't expand their businesses, so they started to spend money in arts, in philosophy, in literature, in things like that. The printing press was a really important invention that was created in 450 by a German metal worker who was Gottsmith. His invention was really important because it helped to spread the ideas of the Renaissance. Also, it helped to mass produce books, for example, because in the Middle Ages, only few people could read and write. Mostly were the monks, and the books were all copied by hand in Latin because were manuscripts and were religious. And the church controlled all the learnings. In 1453, Constantinople, that now is Istanbul, was taken by the Ottoman Empire. So Greek scholars went to Italy, taking with them the manuscripts, documents, and knowledge by the ancient Greek and Rome. Well, now I'm going to talk about the art in the Renaissance period. First of all, I have to say how the people became patrons, for example. Well, before the Renaissance, the only artists were craftsmen or stonemasons. But fortunately, with the increase in trade, the people could be more rich, and successful people started to be patrons. That means that they paid to artists to make a painting or a sculpture, and that started to demonstrate like a synonym of wealth. Sorry, because only the rich people could have all his house decorated with sculptures, or decorated, for example, his walls with fresco. Also, here in this period is when artists started to being recognized as talented, and also as admirable people. So here is when they started to sign their paintings, for example, and to make self-portraits. The art in the Renaissance was divided in two periods, the early Renaissance and the high Renaissance. The early Renaissance started in 1400 and ended approximately in 1480. In this period, the artists wanted to represent the ancient ideas of Greece and Rome, and they also wanted to create like a perfect form with symmetry. Some important artists were Giotto, Masaccio, and also Donatello. And then was the High Renaissance. This started in 1475 and ended in 1525. In this period, the artists have an interest about the perspective and the space, and they wanted to create like more realism. Some important artists were Da Vinci, Raphael, and also Michelangelo. Another big change was the subject, because in the Middle Ages was representing the religion, the Catholic Church, the Christians, but in the Renaissance was representing the Greek and the Roman mythology, historical subjects, and also there were portraits of individuals. One important example was the Mona Lisa. And also they represent some details of everyday life. For example, some artists represent naked bodies. A really important art in that moment was the Byzantine art that was developed in the Byzantine Empire between the 4th century and the 15th century. It was in the approximately in the Middle East in Asia. This Byzantine art in the Byzantine art, the artists use, for example, gold in the background, and they use the technique of mosaicism, and they represent the human without the 3 dimensions. That means that the paintings were plain. And so in Italy, the artists wanted to represent something different. So they started to use the symmetry, the proportion, the use of lights and darknesses, and they wanted to make like an improvement. As I said before, the artists wanted to represent the subject in a more realistic way. That was possible because of the new techniques and methods that could make the subject and the background like in the real life. And also that gives more emotion to the subject. The new techniques and styles were the perspective, the proportion and balance, the uses of light and dark, and also the sfumato. First of all was the perspective. Well, the artist wanted to represent the 3 dimensions, so when you look at paint, you see that one object is nearer than the other. Then was the balance and proportion. Well, that represents that a subject is in a correct size comparing each other. For example, an apple is smaller than a watermelon, for example. Then was the uses of dark and light. This was more used in the Baroque period, in the Baroque art, because it add like shadows or light to add more drama. And then was the sfumato. This was used by Leonardo da Vinci to use or to represent more dimensions and perspective. This was like blurring the lines between the objects, and it was used, for example, in the Mona Lisa, that he blurred all the background, for example. New techniques were possible thanks to the patrons, who are people that gave money to the artists so they could experimentate, they could travel, they could live, and also they could study these new techniques. When a patron commissioned a work of art, a public work of art, it was considered like a gift for the society. So they gained fame. Also,